Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of To The Point podcast. Everybody's doing well on this beautiful Thursday. We're almost at the end of July. Crazy enough, July 29th today. And I can't believe it, but also the sports world is buzzing. That's one thing we can thank COVID for, pushing the NHL season back, pushing the NBA back. We have NFL starting this week, training camps, Aaron Rodgers craziness. Of course, the Olympics, which was delayed a year. I'm not going to thank them for that, but a lot going on. A lot of Olympic storylines, and I didn't mention this yesterday. I should have. But I want to give a happy belated birthday to my sister, Tally. Great sister, love her to death. Sometimes, I joke that she's a pain in the ass, but I know she only looks out for my best interest when I'm doing stupid things, but she's been a big support system of mine from day one. So I just like to say happy belated birthday to my sister. I love you, and thank you for the continued support and everything you do for me. So there's my little sappiness to start the show, but we're going to get into all today. I did the Free Agent Frenzy podcast yesterday. There's been some signings since, some interesting moves. Brandon Saad's off the board. The Worm, Corey Perry, has a new landing spot. We'll touch on Dougie Hamilton. I'm going to try to get through everything. MLB trade deadline, hockey, the NBA draft tonight. But I want to start off with the Olympics. And, the Olympics is not something I really get excited for too many weeks in advance. It's a 2-week event, and I'm invested for those 2 weeks. I don't do a lot of prep work before. I know the big names, but I'm not researching mountain biking. I'm not doing extensive research on judo. But when it's on TV, I'm watching it. And beach volleyball, the rugby sevens, Canada just kicking Brazil's ass last night, the women. I mean, that was captivating TV, and I'm glued in. Canadian women's basketball beating South Korea last night, improved to 1-1. I'm all over it, and I'm watching sports that I don't, normally watch. I'm going to watch beach volleyball. I'm not going to watch it again for another 4 years. More likely than not. I'll watch it if I'm having a couple drinks on a boat and I stop on a beach. That's the closest thing I'll watch to, that's how close I'll come to watching beach volleyball in the next 4 years. But it's interesting. And one of the sports that's really, it gets highlighted during the Olympics is gymnastics. And the big reason for that is, of course, Simone Biles, the 24-year-old American who is the best gymnast in the world. It's undisputed. And normally I'd be talking about her great outing. She wins another gold medal. The United States continue to add to their total. They're in a battle with China and Japan right now for the total medal count. But that's not what the story is on Simone Biles as we're entering, I believe, day 7 of the 2020 Olympics. It's that Simone Biles has been dealing with some mental health issues. And she had to pull out of team competition. The preliminary round, she did not fare well, had a poor outing. She mentioned that she knew it wasn't going to go well. She didn't feel good in training. She had these, different feelings. And then after the fact, she said, I just can't do this. Mentally, I'm not in the right headspace to do this. And this is really the second major athlete that's come out and said that they've been dealing with mental health issues. If you think of Naomi Osaka in the tennis world, she's the best women's tennis player in the world. Ash Barty is ranked number 1. I'm taking Osaka. Not only is she the best female tennis player in the world, she's also the most marketable female tennis player in the world. She's very attractive. She's great. She's very quirky. She's different. And I think when she does speak to the media, she brings something different because she's very naive, very humble, and she's just very likable. She's got the most followers of any female tennis player on Instagram. So that tells you the kind of reach that she has. But these two women are facing the same issue, mental health problems. And mental health is so hard to gauge because what is mental health? I think that's something that's still very misunderstood in our modern world, where there are people that think mental health is not real, or it doesn't affect people, or, well, just battle through it. It's only a sport. But I give these women a ton of credit for having the courage to come out and speak about this. A few years ago, Kevin Love did this in the NBA. He wrote a piece in the Players Tribune talking about his mental health problems, how he was dealing with it, how he dealt with it during games. He had to take a break. Again, that takes a lot of courage. I think this mental health opening up is not as big of a gap, but I think it's similar realm as to these, professional athletes, celebrities, even just a person in general coming out, being gay, transgender, a member of the LGBTQ community. That takes a whole lot of courage. And for anyone to critique Simone Biles, and right now, I believe they should really check themselves, because you do not know what shoes she's walking in. You're not in her position, where the only way Simone Biles gets any credit from the Olympics is winning gold. And even then, does she get credit? Because she was supposed to do that. And that's what's so difficult about being the best. If you don't reach the expected destination, it's a failure. And this is a fault of mine too, because on this podcast, if somebody that I believe should win doesn't, that season was a complete failure. And I'm not necessarily backing off that opinion, but it makes myself look and say, okay, am I being a little too hard here? And I think occasionally I am. And I should give people more credit. Nathan McKinnon, the Colorado Avalanche, I believe, should have made it to the Stanley Cup final. Yet they lost to Vegas. And Vegas had a great series, and they're a good team. And I got to look and say, okay, the Vegas Golden Knights are no slouch. In this individual thing, when it comes to mental health, Simone Biles clearly is facing pressure she's never had. And I think a big reason for this, that in the past, the likes of Michael Jordan, or even in the past number of years, Michael Phelps, because this problem isn't what it was now, is social media. Social media can be crippling to a nobody like me. But you're talking about a professional athlete who has millions of followers, where people follow you just to bury you. They'll go on your timeline, they'll write negative things. And, athletes can say that they don't have their mentions on, and some do. But there's others who like to interact with their fans, interact with people. And occasionally, what's going to come up? A really negative comment. It can be racially motivated in the I think for Osaka and Biles. And there's no proof to say that this is the main reason they have this. But you think that this is not part of it, I think is naive. And for Biles, for Osaka, there's just so much pressure. There's more of media presence now than there ever was. NBC and all the different journalists that are there, it's just different. The sports world has never been bigger. Sports is a conglomerate, and it's massive. If we're just talking sports as a landscape, my favorite thing in the world is sports. There's nothing I love more, friends and family excluded. Sports is my being. So there's tons of people like me where you go to work, you punch the clock, you make your money, you go home, get supper, do whatever you got to do. And then what do you do when it's 7, 8 o'clock at night till you go to bed? You watch sports. That's your life. And you think of all the millions of people around the world. Simone Biles is the greatest, but she's only the greatest on the big scale every 4 years. And in this case, 5, because it was delayed last year. You're sitting there waiting and waiting for this opportunity. And the one great thing that can happen for you is a gold medal. And you know the pressure. It's win or bust. And that's not easy. Not everybody can deal with that as easy as, say, a Michael Jordan, who from 1992 to 1998 was cyborg. He was completely plugged in, but something he didn't have to deal with was social media. There's no social media in 1998. Was there MySpace in 1998? Probably not. It's just different now. And another woman, Katie Ledecky, a swimmer for the United States, she ran her second fastest swim time in her history of swimming. And she came in second. The second fastest race she's ever done, but she got beat. How can you do much better than that? But her only great option is a gold medal. And again, her performance in my spectrum, where I only believe in gold, takes a hit because she balled out. She deserves to come home with something, you'd think. Still. But it's a lot of pressure. There's no Michael Phelps this year. There's no Usain Bolt. So women like Simone Biles, women like Katie Ledecky, it's on them. For Canada, in a much smaller sense, because I don't really think there's not pressure on Penny Oleksiak like there is on Simone Biles or Katie Ledecky. That's just my opinion. I say that because in Canada, we're very happy with bronze medals as a country, I think. I think that's something I've seen on social media, just people interacting. Getting a bronze is Penny's only gotten silver and bronzes so far in this 2020 Olympics. And most people are pretty happy with that. I'm not ecstatic about it. I think I'd love to see a gold flipped in there. But again, that's not going to cut it. Simone Biles, Katie Ledecky, you come home with gold or you don't come home. It's that sense to me. So when you're put up against a wall and the only great option is win or nothing, that's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. And in my heart of hearts, I really hope Simone Biles can participate next week in the individual events and hope she does really well. However, I do have this other side of me where I totally respect her mental health process, and I'm never going to critique that because I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know what's in her head. I think it's for anybody to critique her on why she's not competing. I can critique Tuukka Rask because I think he quit on the Boston Bruins and he had to go home and deal with a family matter that he never clarified. I'll critique him for that. Jonathan Drouin leaving the Montreal Canadiens for personal reasons when he's going through a terrible year, I'll critique him for that. He didn't say mental health. Tuukka Rask didn't say my kid broke his arm. It's just, I'm sick of this. In this case, they're giving us the reason why. But for Simone Biles, I do think there's another side of the coin because in how I was how I was raised, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're going to be a hard worker, you go punch your clock. If you're sick, you can't go to work. Okay, that's fine. But you can't do both. You can't go party when you call in sick. So I don't think she should compete next week. Now, in my opinion, you can't just switch mental health on and off. It can't just be, well, I felt really bad this weekend during team performance, and then next week, well, I'll turn it on and go win gold. I think that sends the wrong message, and I think that'll bring on more criticism. That's just my advice to her. I think more people will be upset that what happened last week. Now you're fine all of a sudden. And Naomi Osaka sat out Wimbledon and the French Open, two majors where she had a potential to win both of them. She would have good odds, and that's about If she wins both those tournaments, that's over $4 million in her pocket. She didn't play in them. She didn't make a cent. So it just tells you Naomi was going through something real. And there's no bigger stage for Simone to not compete at the Olympics. And I just think for her credibility, for her stance to really resonate with people and just to sink in, I'm dealing with something really serious here. And it's so serious that I can't compete at the Olympics. The Olympics is the biggest stage gymnastics will ever get, and she can't do it. That tells you that this is not some bullshit that she's coming up with. This is a real danger, something real that she's going through. And I just hope she can get better. But I worry that if she does compete next week, she will face a lot of criticism. And I think she'll face some criticism from people that are on her side right now. Because if you break your leg today, you're not competing on Monday, right? It's an injury. Mental health should be considered an injury. I don't know how you can quantify how long you got to miss, but when you have a concussion, you got to pass certain tests. And maybe that's something that mental health is going to have to be included in the medical report, because I think it's something that's only going to become more and more prevalent as years go on. And obviously I wish the best for Simone. She's the best gymnast in the world. That's not going to change after the next 2 weeks. But I'm interested to see what decision she comes up with for the next couple weeks at the Olympics, and ultimately what goes down with the United States and the medaling at the gymnastics. So really interesting storyline there for the Olympics. It continues to go on. I mentioned volleyball. The golf has started. Mackenzie Hughes, our Canadian, shot 2 under to start the tournament. So solid start for him. Most of the North American golfers are not even in the top 10. Some Straka, he's a member of the European Tour. He shot 8 under yesterday. So he leads the field, and we'll see how that goes. But that'll wrap up on Sunday with the golf being decided with the gold medal. So golf starting, we got track and field next week, but I've been glued into the Olympics, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Tonight is the NBA draft, and like the NFL, it's a much better product than the NHL draft. There's more hype, more about the prospects, and they just do a better job of promoting the sport. And at the end of March Madness, it really starts the NBA draft and where everything is going. And tonight, the Detroit Pistons are on the clock. And in the past 50 minutes, it was reported that they are going to be selecting Cade Cunningham, a small forward out of Oklahoma State. And he was the presumptive number 1 pick. There are a number of players that I'll touch on here that I think are going to be great NBAers, but Cunningham does play the elite position in the NBA nowadays, and that is the wing position. LeBron James is a wing player. Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard. The 3 position has really become the centerpiece of a team. It's what the superstar plays. There are guys that don't play the 3 that are great. James Harden, Kyrie Irving come to mind. But Giannis Antetokounmpo is a 3. You see the guys that are centerpieces to championship teams, they play the 3. You'll have your complementary pieces, but normally these guys are playing the 3, and they are the best player on the team. So Cunningham, they got bounced in the second round of March Madness, but he had a great season. I'm not convinced that he's going to be a LeBron, a Kevin Durant type player that can be the face of a franchise, but the Pistons need help. The city of Detroit needs help. They are in a really bad tailspin. You have the Pistons, who are terrible. You have the Detroit Lions, who have been probably the most irrelevant franchise maybe in the last 20, 30 years. And I'm talking all of pro sports. Them and the Detroit Lions and the Sacramento Kings got to be right tied with each other because nobody cares about Detroit. It's just this, they had the Red Wings for a long time, but 22 straight years of playoffs. But then Datsuk, Zetterberg leaves, they get older, Lidstrom retires, and it's just, they bottomed out, and now they're going through a rebuild, and they've started to add some pieces, but again, they're not a very good team. And then you wrap it up, Pistons, you got the Lions, you got them, and the Detroit Tigers are the bottom three of Major League Baseball too. So it's ugly right now in Detroit, but the Pistons do have the number one pick. They got rid of Blake Griffin last year. They've gotten rid of Andre Drummond, so 2 bad contracts. They got to hope that they can hit on some young guys, make some trades. But getting a centerpiece, it's like Zion Williamson in New Orleans. New Orleans was a team that was no good. They did win the draft lottery. They didn't finish last. Neither did Detroit. They won the draft lottery, having the 3rd best odds at getting the pick. But again, they have a player that can be the face of the franchise that's legit. It's not Blake Griffin, who is coming from another team. His best days are behind him. So now you can build around him and hope that free agents will want to play with Cade down the line. Second team on the board are the Houston Rockets, and their likely selections will be the Evan Mobley, Jalen Green, or Jalen Suggs. Evan Mobley was a great player for UCLA, was part of their great run to the Final Four. Improbable run where they had to play in to get into the tournament, then became really a Cinderella story, nearly beating Gonzaga, but Jalen Suggs, who we'll touch on, hit the game-winning shot from nearly half court. But Mobley's big. His brother will also be in this draft. Good rebounder, really athletic guy, and he'd be interested to me to not take number one. But my 2 favorite prospects in this draft are Jalen Suggs and Davion Mitchell. And Suggs, it's apparent why. He's just so skilled. His 3-point shot could use some work, but he's got great handles. He's ambidextrous. He can dribble with either hand, and he can attack the rim. Yes, he's not a 3, but for a team that needs a point guard, he is their point guard. He will be the floor general, and he can get his own shot, and he can create opportunities for his teammates. And looking at the draft order, you got Houston. Cleveland is rumored to take either Green or Mobley, whoever's left on the board that the Rockets do not take. So that would leave the Toronto Raptors, oddly enough, with the 4th pick. They've moved up in the draft after a terrible season playing down in Florida. And it looks like Kyle Lowry is going to be leaving the team. Does Masai Ujiri return? He's still not under contract. So they have a lot of question marks there. But they got Van Fleet, who plays the 2. Siakam's still on the roster, even though he's rumored to be traded. They got OG Anunoby. So they do still have some good players. But losing Lowry would be missing a point guard, missing the floor general. And that would make all the sense in the world to me to take Jalen Suggs. And especially if the top 3 are off the board, he is the best player available. And to me, drafting is quite simple. You do not draft for need. You draft the best player, especially in the first. There's only 2 rounds in the NBA. You need to draft the best player available, because taking a reach early, we see what Montreal did with Logan Mailloux. It doesn't work. It's bad PR. Suggs, if he's there, he's the best player. You take him. And if he's not, if I'm a team's going to get really lucky tonight, because a player's just going to be sitting there and they can scoop him up. And that player is Davion Mitchell. And Mitchell really was the centerpiece for Baylor winning the national championship. He was the big shot maker. He got assists per game. He rebounds. He's another guy that can be a 2 or play point guard, I think, in the NBA. But his defensive play is top notch. And for a team like Toronto, look at Orlando. I really hope he does not go to Orlando, because that's just a pit of despair. But Oklahoma State's a team with a lot of draft picks in the next couple of years. He'd be a good guy to put in there, because I feel like he's got the heart, got the desire to battle through a few tough seasons. But who else is sitting there but Golden State at the 7th pick? I don't know if he falls that far, but obviously they have Steph Curry, they have Klay Thompson, but you need strong bench players. And, Curry's going to be 34 years old. He's not going to be playing forever. Maybe Mitchell doesn't play his entire career in Golden State, but to go play under Curry, get some important minutes would be important for him, and to be part of a team that I think is going to have a big turnaround. Steph Curry is going to be healthy. You're going to, he played last year, almost won the MVP, but Klay Thompson's going to be coming back healthy. They have Draymond Green. Do they trade, the number 2 pick overall last year, James Wiseman, potentially flipping him to the Raptors to get Pascal Siakam? So there's always that potential. And I just look at Mitchell as a guy that would fit in well, but Orlando and Oklahoma City, I can't see both teams passing on him if he's there. He was just too good. Obviously, you can get lulled into March Madness, but the guy can play. He's on Jay Billis, who I believe in the most when it comes to his big board and top-notch players. I think he's the best college basketball analyst out there. He has Mitchell number 7. So that would put Golden State right in the thick of things. But I think he could get picked before that. I think the top 3 picks are set. I think it'll be Cunningham, then Jalen Green, then Evan Mobley. And that would leave the Toronto Raptors to take Jalen Suggs. I think after that, it becomes kind of a wide open party. But it would not surprise me if the Orlando Magic take Davion Mitchell there. They do have Markelle Fultz, who tore his ACL last year, a former number 1 overall pick of the 76ers, who they're still trying to resurrect his career. So playing both guys together, 2 young guys battle it out for minutes, could be an interesting angle too, where both guys could push each other. Orlando's going through a rebuild where they traded Nikola Vucevic, traded Evan Fournier, traded Aaron Gordon. So they've gotten rid of their best players, and now they're trying to rebuild something and become a team that can, at least compete for playoffs, compete for a championship 3-4 years down the line. So the draft should be interesting. Live tonight, NBA draft. And it's always interesting to see the NBA draft. You see some interesting suits. Guys kind of show their personality tonight, which is another more interesting aspect of this draft compared to the NHL, because it's so wooden. But draft night's always fun, any sport. You like to see, well, if somebody falls, what happens here? Where does the team go? But both rounds, first and second round of the NBA draft, are tonight. So that'll be a good theater to watch tonight, as well as the Olympics. The NFL is always a constant story. Even in, I've talked about it in May and June, where it should be the dead, but there's rumors all the time. Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. But the constant story throughout the NFL offseason was Aaron Rodgers and whether he was going to return to the Green Bay Packers. And for the longest time, I really didn't know. And I thought, well, he's not going to come back. He keeps holding out. But Monday, it broke that the Packers are making some concessions. He would have his, the 2022-2023 season of his contract voided so that he could ultimately leave Green Bay. They still have some say where he goes. They could re-up that contract, but it gives him flexibility to leave Green Bay, not have 2 years left on his deal, just 1. And he didn't have any money added to his contract, but when he does agree to come back, they also made the concession that they would reacquire Randall Cobb, one of Rodgers' favorite wide receivers. He was moved a few years ago, played a season for the Dallas Cowboys, played a season for the Houston Texans, was in Houston, and then they traded for him yesterday. But Mark Murphy, the president of the Packers, talked to season ticket holders saying, I'm sure a lot of you are torn on whether it's Aaron or us who's at fault here. But I look at the fault in this story, and I'll touch on what Rodgers said yesterday. But I think this is on ESPN. I think this is on Adam Schefter in particular. Adam Schefter broke on draft night that Aaron Rodgers was seeking a trade from the Green Bay Packers, and that he would not be returning to the franchise. He had told multiple people that he would not return to Green Bay. And from then on, different things broke out where he said it wasn't about the money, and Rodgers was, and it was always a story. I watch NFL Live every day, and they talked about it sometimes, and sometimes I just skip through the segment because it's the same thing over and over. But all this reporting, all this talk was for nothing. Deshaun Watson, he was never going to report to Houston. He reported. Aaron Rodgers was not going to return to Green Bay. He's still there. Like, what? Nothing was accomplished. Russell Wilson is still the Seattle Seahawks starting quarterback. So I think Adam Schefter, he's the best reporter in the game. I think in any sport, he's damn good because he breaks everything. But I think he was played by Aaron Rodgers' agent, where Aaron said, we need Schefter to keep breaking this out. We need new headlines. Aaron's not going to say anything, but we'll just use Adam Schefter as our mouthpiece. And they did it effectively, where he talked a big game every day on NFL Live. Where's Rodgers going to go? Does he return? You know, every analyst saying, oh, I wouldn't want to return after all this. And ESPN really failed us as viewers because they gave us a false narrative. They didn't give us the real story. And it's frustrating because you're just sitting there saying, well, why didn't we get the real story? What happened here? And to me, it's clear that Aaron Rodgers was playing all along. He was always going to come back to Green Bay. He didn't have an option after they didn't trade him at the draft. After, he wanted to, if he was going to be moved, it was going to be on draft night or before, but the breaking news was not going to be on draft day. That gives teams very little time to make a trade, put a trade package together. So clearly that was just Aaron Rodgers throwing it out there to become the centerpiece, become the talking point of draft night, because the year before, the Green Bay Packers traded up and selected his heir apparent, Jordan Love, out of Utah State. So now Rodgers reports, shows up with the Thunder Mifflin t-shirt on, the man bun, looks like he's, Rodney Dangerfield back to school. And he had a lot to say. He said basically that he wants input with the organization. He said he didn't like how they handled certain things in the past. One of the main things being how they just discarded with veterans. He talked about how they cut Charles Woodson, how they tried to give a pay cut to Jordy Nelson, then they cut him outright. A guy he liked. They cut Jake Kumaro. A number of other veterans that I'm forgetting. BJ Raji, another guy, TJ Lang, and he talked about how all these guys were basically great teammates, good guys in the locker room, and they didn't get great treatment out the door from Green Bay. And it makes Aaron sound like a really good guy. Obviously, Randall Cobb is coming back, so it shows that it shows that Aaron has a good relationship with his receivers, but it's complicated. It's murky, and I don't know where we go here. Aaron's going to play this year in Green Bay, and the Green Bay Packers have a roster that can compete for a Super Bowl title. They've been to back-to-back NFC championship games. 2 years ago, they get blown out by the San Francisco 49ers. This past year, they lose a tight one to Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where they didn't go for it on 4th and 4 from the 8-yard line. And so they do have the team. Deontay Adams is in the last year of his deal. It sounds like he wants to be the highest paid wide receiver in football. But I wonder, through all of this, they have a championship roster, but do they have championship DNA? How motivated is Aaron Rodgers to win a Super Bowl for the Packers? And I get it that he would get a title with that, but he would be rewarding the franchise that he felt has not rewarded him properly. And that seems counterintuitive. And, Devontae Adams, he's been in a stalemate all offseason long. And Mark Murphy and them are saying, this year is basically just a walk year where Aaron plays great, and then what happens? He walks, and then Jordan Love's our quarterback. I look at the team and say, you're stacked. You got Zadarius Smith. You got Preston Smith on the defense. Your corners could be better. I don't think their defense is loaded. They got good pass rush. But you got Devontae Adams. I think you got Alan Lazard, who can only get better. I think he's really good. Valdez Scantling's good. You got another year with Robert Tonyan at tight end. But how does this go down? And is this year just a big tug of war where, Rodgers has said that really one of the big reasons this team has been successful is because of him, because players are not coming to Green Bay because it's a great, vacation destination. They're coming to Green Bay to play with him and compete for a title. And there's some truth to that, but he's heading into his 17th season as a starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, and he's only won one Super Bowl. He's only been to one Super Bowl, and that was in 2010, 11 years ago. So as good as he's been, he's only had one. He's 37 years old, coming off an MVP season. I think he can play great. I think he's the most talented. Before Patrick Mahomes, I think Aaron Rodgers is the most talented quarterback to ever play the position. But is the most talented doesn't guarantee. Tom Brady, when it comes to just athletic ability, he's one of the least athletic quarterbacks to ever play the position. So there's a lot of uncertainty in Green Bay. There's going to be a lot of talk around the NFL. Where does Deshaun Watson go? How do these teams stack up? But, Aaron Rodgers is back. He participated in practice yesterday. He's in Green Bay now. He's with the team. But I have real big concerns about whether this team can hold up this year. Just as a unit, after everything they've been through this offseason, it hasn't been good. I'm sure there's players in that locker room who are siding with Aaron Rodgers. But I think there are a number of players that are like, screw this guy. He's an egomaniac. He's hurting our long-term future. And we need to figure out another way to do this. So with all that being said, there's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of upheaval. And I just worry that the Green Bay Packers Foundation and this team that's been close to the dance a number of times, I just don't know if they can get back there this year after everything that's transpired so far. But the NFL preseason kicks off a week from tonight. That'll be Cowboys, Steelers. It's a Hall of Fame game where Peyton Manning, the aforementioned Charles Woodson, Calvin Johnson, and many others will be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 2 years worth, 2020. The 2020 class was not eligible to be inducted because of COVID and restrictions. So this year they'll have two different draft classes. So two different Hall of Fame classes. And it's always a special night. You get Cowboys, Steelers, so you're not going to see a whole lot of regulars. But it's a special game. You get to see a lot of the great Hall of Fame players play, and that's a week from tonight. Also a week from tonight is the kickoff of the CFL season. And I'm getting more and more excited for it. I still got to get accustomed to the players and who's back and who's not. There's been a lot of retirements, players having played for 18 months. But to get these guys get back on the field is a great thing. That'll kick off a week from tonight, and then they play every week until December. So that's great. Get them back on the schedule, and the CFL should be a focal point of the sports calendar throughout August, because you'll have Major League Baseball, and you get a lull from hockey, you get a lull from basketball. NFL's into preseason, so they should get some good traction through August as they get back on the field for the first time since November of 2019. That brings us to, yesterday was NHL Free Agent Frenzy Day. I talked about, what I did, what happened yesterday across the NHL world. And it was a big day. It was a lot of money being spent, a lot of term handed out, some controversial selections for sure. I talked about them yesterday, but there's a few things I didn't touch on. Then I'll touch on some teams that I really liked. But the Winnipeg Jets, I didn't touch about them yesterday as a Canadian team because, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, very active. But prior to yesterday was the day before, really, where Winnipeg was active. They acquired Brendan Dillon, which I liked. He's a big defenseman. They need defenseman help. They're a team that last year at the trade deadline, they were probably the biggest failure for me because Kevin Cheveldayoff did not go out and improve his defense score. And ultimately, did they miss Mark Scheifele in the playoffs? Of course. But they still needed defensive help. Tucker Poolman had to play a big role, and they had to rely on guys that really weren't ready for that spotlight. Josh Morrissey had one of the worst series in the past couple of years when it comes just to in net play. So he had a rough go. Then that brings us to, so they add Brendan Dillon for 2 second-round picks. I like that. Dillon's been around the league. He's a tough veteran. And I think he fits into that Winnipeg mold well. Blake Wheeler, Scheifele, Connor, these guys take it on the chin, and they're not afraid to bring it. Then they added Nate Schmidt from Vancouver, who, Vancouver really wanted to get rid of that money so they could make different moves with Ekman Larson, signing guys yesterday to contracts, re-signing Connor Garland. But Schmidt is good because he's different from Brendan Dillon. He's a guy who can move the puck. Morrissey is an offensive-minded defenseman. I think Neil Pionk is the perfect blend of both, where I like him better than Josh Morrissey. I think he's got a little bit more up here when it comes to hockey sense. But Schmidt is a guy who originally drafted by Washington, grinded his way to the NHL, moved to Vegas, had a successful tenure there. But they just had to move him out because he was really a cap casualty as they moved to Skip Pacioretty, signed Mark Stone, Petrangelo, whatnot. And it never really worked out for him in Vancouver. It wasn't a great fit. But I do think that Schmidt is a top 4 defenseman. He's established that in this league. He's a guy that will jump into the play. He brings a physical presence like Dillon, but he does have more of an offensive upside. And losing Tucker Poolman to the Canucks on a 4-year deal, I think Schmidt is better than Tucker Poolman right now. Obviously, makes a lot more money at over $5 million a season. But you look at their D. Now you got Morrissey, Pionk, Schmidt, and Dillon. That's a strong top 4. They also got Ville Heinola, who they're going to hope can push through and make the team next year. And I like their defense core more now. They've added some good pieces, and I think they waited an offseason too long. But they bring back Paul Stastny. They get these defensemen. They still have one of the best top 3-4 goaltenders in the world. So easing his workload a bit is incredibly important. They lose Laurent Brossoit to Vegas, but Eric Comrie is an original draft pick. He's bounced around, was claimed by New Jersey on waivers. But right now, he's their backup goaltender. But when you have a guy like Connor Hellebuck, you can have an Eric Comrie start 20 games, and it shouldn't be that big of a hit because Hellebuck is one of the few goalies that can start 60-plus games. There's not many anymore. Vasilevsky, Hellebuck are 2 of those guys. Jacob Markstrom, I think, can fit that description in Calgary. But you have that option, you take advantage of it. But Cheveldayoff, I look at a lot of these Canadian GMs. I've talked about it yesterday with Jim Benning and with Brad Treliving. Their asses are on fire. They need to win now. And no different for Kevin Cheveldayoff. You have better teams than Calgary and Vancouver. Yes, you made the playoffs last year. You won a round. You swept the Edmonton Oilers. But you need to do more with this team. Mark Scheifele is a top 15 player in the world. Connor Hellebuck is one of the 3 best goalies in the world. You have some solid defense. You got good Pete. Kyle Connor is still one of the most underrated players in the NHL. Take advantage. Blake Wheeler's 35. He's only going to be a really effective player he's only got so many games left at being an elite player. And if they don't win, I think it's this year, next year, it's not going to happen for Winnipeg. And you're going to look back and say, we had Mark Scheifele. We had these guys in their prime. And the best we got was a conference final where we got swept a few years back, or, losing to Montreal in a sweep in the second round when we were in the Canadian division during COVID. So I applaud Cheveldayoff. I think you should have did it last year at the deadline, but improve that defense score now. They don't do it through free agency. They do it via trades. That's fine. However you want to build your team, just add to that. And I think Winnipeg right now, on paper, they are the best team in Canada. I like them more than I like the Toronto Maple Leafs. I said that last year. They went further in the playoffs, so they backed that up for me. But they ultimately lost to Montreal. So I think they need to prove it, just like Toronto, just like so many teams need to prove it. You need to go deeper in the playoffs than you have in the past number of years. And it can't just be, Vegas and Tampa that are consistently winning. You need to push through and challenge some of these big contenders. Dougie Hamilton, he was the number 1 player on the TSN trade, on the free agent board for good reason. He's bounced around his career, Calgary, Boston, Carolina, and he's been known for being a weird guy, not exactly the best team guy, where he doesn't like to drink. He doesn't fit into that party lifestyle, so to speak. That never was a big issue to me. The biggest story was he liked to go to museums. So he likes to use his brain. That again, I'm not a big museum guy, but that probably tells you that's probably better for Dougie Hamilton than it is for me. I don't, art and stuff like that. I'm still trying to figure that stuff out. But he likes to do that. But you know what he does is he produces on the ice. The last 3 years in the NHL, he has the most goals by a defenseman. That's any defenseman that he's got the most goals. In Carolina, he's been playing with Slavin. He's been playing a top 3 defenseman role for the last number of years. Since leaving Calgary, he's established himself as an elite defenseman. I believe Dougie Hamilton will be on Canada's Olympic team come February. And he's a really good player. But I look at Dougie Hamilton and say, you looked at Seth Jones getting money a few days before him. Seth Jones got 9.5. Do I think Dougie Hamilton's better than Seth Jones? No. But Dougie Hamilton can say, well, I have better stats than Seth Jones, which is true. But you can make a lot of money and go to a dump. Or you can make a large sum of money and go to a contender. And I think there's a difference. Take $1 million or $2 million less to go to a team that can win tells me that you actually want to win a cup. You want to be part of something. It's not all about the money for you. I think for Philip Grubauer, he showed me yesterday that he's like Dougie Hamilton. He was thinking about his family's long-term future. And I can't discredit him for that, because what do we do as humans? We need to make as much money as we possibly can so we can live the best life. So people critiquing players taking money, I won't do that. I'll critique teams for handing out that kind of money, but I'll never critique a player for taking the contract because it's there. But for Dougie, you're going to make a lot of money. And you're going to, what's $7 million compared to $9 million, really? Yes, it's $2 million, but long-term, what's that going to mean to you? And so he could have stayed in Carolina, who I think got worse yesterday. The next couple weeks I'm going to do teams that I think really got worse, did look better after this free agent period, after the off season. But I think Carolina's top of the board for me, who really got worse. I hate what they did. I like their addition of Ethan Bear, but their goaltending situation, moving out some of their defensemen, it looks really bad, their team. And after a number of years of being an elite team, losing Nedeljkovic. But they offered him 6.25. I get it. You're not taking that. So, okay, that's fine. You don't want to take that. But was New Jersey the only team giving him offers? Because if New Jersey was the only team knocking at the door, which I have a hard time believing, then okay, you have to go to New Jersey. But take $7 million and go to a team that actually has a chance. Would the New York Islanders have given him $7 million to go there? I would have offered him that, because I think the Islanders are really close. They're in Game 7 against Tampa Bay. It's as close as it gets to get to a Stanley Cup final. I think Seattle would have been a better situation. They had $15 million in cap room. They still do. That would have been a better situation than going to New Jersey. But he decides to go to New Jersey, where he gets 7 years at $9 million a year, $63 million. A lot of money. And again, I think he'll play in the Olympic team. But you'll make all that money. And are you ever going to win anything? New Jersey does have some good players. Jack Hughes took a big step last year. They drafted his brother in Luke. They have Nico Hischier. Hischier is a second line center on a bad team. I think he's a third line center at heart. He's a second line center on a team that's not going to win anything. They don't have a starting goalie. They have 2 defensemen making $18 million of their cap. They're trying to become Toronto, except they're worse. They don't even make the playoffs. PK Subban still has a year left on his deal, where he's making $9 million, and he's become one of the worst. When you look at his contract, it's one of the worst in the NHL, period. And for Dougie Hamilton, who complained about Tampa going over the cap, he doesn't have to worry about New Jersey going over the cap, because believe me, they won't. They don't spend money there. Spend money on him, but they won't get to the cap with that team. So he won't have to worry about that team getting to the cap, let alone going over it. Because those cheap bastards at Newark love saving money. And I just look at him and say, you're in a position to win in Carolina. You had a really good coach. And not that New Jersey and Lindy Ruff's not a good coach, because he is. But they don't have the infrastructure. I don't think they have the ownership group to build a winning team here. And it's going to be a lot of frustration and him sitting there making a lot of money, maybe putting up big numbers, but they mean nothing because you're on a really bad team. It's just going to be year over year of, well, the New York Rangers might win a Stanley Cup in your tenure in New Jersey. Do the Islanders finally break through? There's going to be a lot of teams surpassing you, and you're just going to be sitting there holding the bag saying, well, at least I got my money. But as a competitor, don't you want more than that? Don't you want to win a cup? Don't you want to be in the playoffs at least? New Jersey's not making the playoffs next year. So I applaud him for taking the money. I think $9 million is a lot of money, but has he played to that? He's pretty close. I'm not going to critique the contract. $7-8 million. Yeah, you could pick hairs there, but if I'm him, I'm taking 7 or 8 and going to a team where I at least have a chance. Yes, there are no guarantees, and the guarantee you do have is money, but I'd rather go to a place and try to win, have a good chance. Zach Bogosian yesterday could have made $1.5 to $2 million. That was reported on the open market. And that's $2 million. It's still a lot of money, but he took a 3-year deal at $850,000 because he liked Tampa Bay. He knew the organization and he wanted that stability. And guess what else in all of that? He has a chance to win. He still does with their team. And that means something. Clearly it means something to him. And pivoting into that, Corey Perry was offered more money from multiple teams today. But the Worm, who's been to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals with Dallas, with Montreal, making the league minimum last year, making $850 the year before, signed a 2-year deal at $1 million a season with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's lost to them in the past 2 seasons in the Stanley Cup final. If you can't beat them, join them. And he did that today. He's now a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And his regular season is irrelevant. It's what happens during the real season, the playoffs. And he is going to bring it. He is going to provide what you need. Clearly, Tampa was sick of playing against him because he's a pain in the ass. He was one of the few Montreal Canadiens that had a good Stanley Cup final. He had a great playoff. And he earned that second year. The past 2 years, he grinded. He played his heart out. Him, Eric Staal, and Yoel Armia were so big in Montreal getting as far as they did. And Eric Staal is still in the market. I think he will get a contract from somebody. But you see Armia, he gets a deal, 4-year deal from Montreal. You get Corey Perry here. Fourth line guys are really important. Patrick Maroon and Ross Colton, these guys, they work their way into the lineup and they become factors. They're not going to put up points every night, but it's called wearing people down. And for Montreal, Deneau and Gallagher were not scoring in the playoffs. That fourth line was scoring every second game. Whether it was Perry, whether it was Staal, or whether it was Armia, that line was having an impact. And I think for Tampa, they look at it and say, we lost our entire third line. On paper, we're a lot worse right now. But we can add players that will bring value when we need them the most. We have Braden Point next year. We still have Kucherov. We got Vasilevsky. But what do we need when it comes to the playoffs? We need a third and fourth line to be effective. They still got Maroon. They got Corey Perry. They got Roscoe Colton. Matthew Joseph, I think, will take a step forward next year. They have Volkov. They have guys, Taylor Radish. They have guys in their farm system that they're going to rely on getting better. They've drafted really, really well. And that's something that they're going to have to rely on players from their farm system to help them get better because they don't have any cap room. But I have more faith in Tampa than I do any other team because we've seen Colton, we've seen Joseph, we've seen Sergachev. These guys get better when they get to Tampa. They go through the Syracuse crunch. It's the best development pipeline AHL team in the NHL, period. And Donnie Gore, Palat, all these guys that have won a Calder Cup went on to win 2 Stanley Cups with Tampa. So I love the ad of Corey Perry. He's not going to be a huge ad in the regular season, but for Montreal, for these other teams, I think you'll regret it because Montreal's going to have to play him a lot next year. He's still in the division, and he's going to be a pain in the ass. He's going to go up against the guys that he was with last year, and he's not easy to play against. Tampa, I think, knew that, and they valued what he brought to the table as an opponent, and now they have him on their side. Late yesterday, the Boston Bruins were very active. They signed Nick Foligno to a 2-year contract worth $3.8 million a season. Foligno had a tough go in Toronto. He was traded for a first-round pick, was injured, couldn't really be part of the team, and when he was out there, he was a liability. Towards the end of that first round, he was on the 4th line, playing very little. But Nick Foligno's a 33-year-old forward. He's still got some fight left in him. It was rumored he might go back to Toronto, could go to Minnesota to play with his brother, but he has good memories from Boston. He has a son who had open heart surgery in Boston, and that was a big part of why they decided to go there, just the sentimental feel. And the Boston Bruins are still in that win now window. He talked about talking to Patrice Bergeron. Patrice talked him into the decision to come to Boston. Not a better salesman than Patrice Bergeron, who's just been the model of consistency and just a great presence for this Boston Bruins team, and obviously their captain. But you look at Foligno, he should play in that top 6. They're still without David Krejci. I think he'll get done, but their big splash move of the day was signing Linus Ullmark. Ullmark has been a goaltender in Buffalo the last number of years, and he's been pretty good for the teams that's been in front of him. He's a young goalie. He was a UFA. They tried to re-sign him, but they couldn't get it done. And he gets to the market, sitting out there a while. I'm like, well, who's going to scoop him up? But Boston signed him to a 4-year deal worth $5 million. And really what it said was Linus Ullmark is the goalie of the future. He's the man that's going to be the heir apparent in Boston. Tuukka Rask remains unsigned. I think he will be signed somewhere in the middle of next year. We'll do something like Mike Fisher did with Nashville, or Justin Williams a few years back, where Tuukka Rask has to have hip surgery. And he's going to be out till at least January or February. And what's the point of signing him right now? He's going to hurt your cap. You can keep money available for him so that when he's available in January or February, you sign him. He can ease his way back into the lineup. But now you have Linus Ullmark, who's your heir apparent. You have Jeremy Swayman, who looks like he's going to be a good goaltender, played some last year. But the big part about this is that Swayman, his entry level is not up yet. He hasn't played the max amount of games for him to be waivers eligible. So if they send him down to Providence next year at the midway point, he cannot be claimed on waivers. And so they will not lose him. So really what Boston's hoping is they will have 3 goalies that they trust to play. Swayman obviously isn't a proven starter, but you'll have Ullmark and Rask sitting there, a 2-headed monster, and Boston get back to the playoffs. They did not keep Nick Ritchie. They did not keep Andre Kasha, but they signed Mike Riley. They got Thomas Nosek from the Vegas Golden Knights. So they've made some moves. I mentioned Nick Foligno. Just find some other guys here on my notes that they brought in. Sometimes I forget. Eric Holla, who's a really good player. I like that ad as a 3rd-line center. And they also added Derek Forbort, who's a big defenseman that can replace Kevin Miller. So in all in all, I really love Boston's day. You add a goalie of the future. You get Derek Forbort to replace Kevin Miller, who's a tough, mean defenseman. Nosek's a guy who can play 4th-line center, who's going to replace Sean Corrali, who signed a 4-year deal in Columbus. You get Holla, who's going to play 3rd-line center. Different player from Nick Ritchie, but he adds a little bit more in the speed department and a little bit more offensive creativity where, Ritchie's game is be physical, get to the net, things of that nature. And then you got Derek Forbort, who's bounced around. He's played in LA, played in Vancouver, played for the Winnipeg Jets, but he's a guy that's not going to hurt your team. He's going to play in your bottom pair of your defense more likely than not. And again, just be a guy in the penalty kill, be physical, and be tough to play against. So the Boston Bruins, I think, really had a really good day and quietly had a really good day. But They're a team that's aging. You got Pasternak, you got Marchand, you got Bergeron, but this is a team that's won before, that's gotten to Stanley Cup final. It's not hoping that something good happens. This is not the Philadelphia Flyers praying that you had a bunch of veterans and that something changes. This is a team that's been to a Stanley Cup final just 2 years ago. And, they're out in the the second round this year, but you improve your team. You don't just stand pat. And you make some tough decisions, but goaltending is pivotal. And obviously defense is huge. McAvoy had a huge year last year. I think they got to hope Brandon Carlo can stay healthy. But, you got some good. Grizzlick continues to take a step forward. So we'll see what happens in Boston, but I do like the outlook of their team and where they're going. And I like the Bruins roster for a team that's getting older, but they continue to keep pushing the envelope and staying in that competitive mindset where they know they're going to have to be good, because they're going back to the Atlantic, where Tampa's going to be there, Montreal, Toronto, Florida continues to get better. You obviously got some clunkers in there with Ottawa, Detroit, but I think even Ottawa will be better next year than they were this year. Didn't do a whole lot at the deadline, but goaltending, they got some young players, and I think they'll be motivated to not be terrible. Like they were the 56-game season this year. They obviously weren't great, but they weren't a joke either. And I think you'll have some guys really come out and try to prove themselves and prove to the team that they are going to be part of that future and part of the rebuild and, the stabilization of that franchise moving forward. I was going to go into Mike Hoffman, but he signed in Montreal. I think I touched on that late in the podcast yesterday. Should be a good goal scorer, power play guy, but I worry about him. If him and Drouin are on the same team, I think that could be concerning. Drouin is a guy that's, I wouldn't say he's the most strong-minded player. You got Hoffman, who's had some problems with Erik Karlsson in the past. So how does that work? And, is Hoffman really the replacement for Drouin? Is Drouin back on this roster next year? If it was up to me, he wouldn't be. But again, who's going to really want him at this point? Didn't hack it in Tampa Bay, wanted to come home, comes home and is now pouting and left the team last year. So we'll see. Tomorrow's podcast, a lot will be, it's either going to be tomorrow or Saturday morning, depending on my day tomorrow, but it's going to be focused on the MLB trade deadline. And there's been a number of moves so far. We see Cesar Hernandez, the second baseman for the Cleveland Indians, Guardians come next year, traded to the Chicago White Sox. That's in division. You got Adam Frazier getting traded from the Pittsburgh Pirates to the San Diego Padres as they continue to try to get better. Today, the Toronto Blue Jays added Brad Hand, the closer for the Washington Nationals, something they desperately need. They've struggled to close out games this year. He hasn't exactly been a great closer, but they needed it, and Washington's been selling so that they get rid of him. But really, you look at it and say, Washington, the biggest name out there is Max Scherzer. He's still one of the best starting pitchers in baseball. He's a 3-time Cy Young winner, and he would be a game breaker. I don't suspect that the Toronto Blue Jays will land him, but a team out west like the Dodgers, if the Padres could get him, would the Giants go all in? I mean, the Giants, they're playing the Dodgers as we speak, winning 3-0 in the bottom of the second. They've won 7 of their last 8 matchups against the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers, Scherzer would replace Trevor Bauer, who's still on this administrative leave. Who knows when he returns? So there's a lot still to be decided. But if the Giants could land Scherzer, that would be a game breaker. And then there's the Cubs. They got Anthony Rizzo, Javi Baez, who I would do everything I could to re-sign, Chris Bryant. So really the 3 big names that helped them win the World Series in 2016 could be on the move tomorrow. So we could see a lot of movement. We saw Ryan Tepera get traded from the Cubs to the White Sox today. That's a crosstown trade. So we'll get into all that. I said either tomorrow or Saturday morning, we're doing a podcast, a lot of it focused. I'll recap the NBA draft. We'll talk about the MLB trade deadline and any other stories from the Olympics over the next couple of days. So a great show today, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A lot happening in the world of sports. So let's rejoice and celebrate it right now. And have a great rest of your Thursday. Long weekend upcoming, so enjoy that as well. And we'll be talking soon.